Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Help Nobody Told Me. I am Jasmine Shapiro. I am a realtor here in the North Shore of Chicago with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And my co-partner is Jordan Kagan, and you are the Man of Silver, and you are on our senior resource team with me and Shannon. And
glad to be here. Glad to have you joining today. Sometimes, in winters or just hanging out all the time in Chicago can get really boring. We have such a beautiful world to see. So today we are lucky enough to have my friend Rick Rosenfeld. He is a travel consultant. He owns Journey Softly. So he has sent people all over the world to about 100 different countries, 7 continents. And so for people that are looking to travel, a unique experience, I think you're a great resource. You have amazing stories to share.
And I have been wanting a travel person on for so long. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you for joining us.
Very excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Journey Softly. How did you get into international travel and consulting?
Yeah, it's a long and winding story. It really starts with going back to childhood when I didn't travel. I'm from Baltimore. My family would do a week in the summer to Ocean City, and then upon duress from the children, I expanded to Disney. The only time I traveled internationally before I graduated college was a trip to Aruba when I was like 12. So international travel was foreign, pun actually intended to me. And when I got out of college, my first job was in Evanston for Rotary International, which is the world headquarters of all of the Rotary clubs around the world. And through that, I started traveling for business and also for pleasure, and literally working with Rotary members from around the world. I fell in love with the world, the cultures, the differences, the places, the people. And from that, it led through a couple of hops to starting my own travel company in 1999. My first travel company was focused on educational travel. I sold that and ultimately worked my way back into the travel industry during the pandemic, which is a great time to get back into travel, and built Journey Softly with an idea of I wanted to sell travel the way I wanted to construct it for people, which is immersing themselves and seeing the world and having a variety of different experiences. So, my second company was really focused on travel the way my clients really wanted to travel. So it's mostly individuals, very few groups at this point.
So wait, you're from Baltimore.
From Baltimore.
Did you go to school in Chicago?
Yep, I came out for Northwestern. Met my wife here. She's from Cincinnati.
Okay.
We stayed, disappointed both families, and have been in Chicago since the 80s.
Okay.
Have you ever stopped wearing purple?
No, I got a lot of purple. A lot of purple.
So do I.
Yeah.
Go purple.
High school, college, Ravens, everything. It's all purple.
All right. So you've helped clients travel to all 7 continents. What inspires people to explore such faraway places?
It's different for different people. For a lot of people, it's about the scenery. What am I going to see? Being out there in nature and seeing amazing different places. A lot of people, it's about the culture. It's the people that you meet along the way, the stories you tell. Sometimes I tell people I'll plan the itinerary, but probably the most memorable experience you'll have is the person you met at a coffee shop and got a chance to talk to. So it's those in-between explorations that are really meaningful. Some people travel for food. Some people are foodies. Some people are traveling for sports. There's so many different reasons why people travel, and the world has so much to offer in all of those categories.
So when they meet you, do they know where they want to go, or do they ask you, can you suggest a place? Here's what I want warm weather, I want cold weather, I want sport. Or,
Yeah.
do they have no idea, or do they sort of have an idea?
Most of the time people have an idea, 90% of the time I'd say. Other times people have an idea of what sort of trip they want. Got a referral today where the client or potential client is saying, they're very descriptive in terms of what they want. They want shoulder season, so they don't want to travel with the heaviest crowds. They want a couple of days of water, but not that much. They're really interested in the scenery and getting around the places and seeing different cultures and experiencing that. And it's like, okay, that's a good start. But they're not sure where they want to go. They threw out an idea, but I'm going to broaden that and give them a bunch of different ideas to choose from.
So from knowing each other through the Northbrook Chamber of Commerce, hear a lot of stories, and so many of our members have used you and rave about you. That's how I know you. I hear you've worked with a number of older travelers. What are some of the common profiles, you could say, or styles or interests that they have had?
Yeah, it really differs. I mean, just like everybody is different, the profiles, there's no one right, thing. There are sometimes that I have seniors that are doing multi-gen trips. They're taking their kids and their grandkids. I just had clients in Morocco doing that a couple of weeks ago, and they took the kids through all the historic cities and down to the Sahara, a couple of days of the desert, and visiting Bedouin villages. So we got the multi-gen trips. You've got couples that are looking to travel. Most of my seniors are in the 60s and 70s age range, occasionally 80s. And also a number of folks in their 50s. But for the folks in the 60s and 70s, a lot of times it's couples that are going out, and they're either looking for a private guided experience, they're looking for maybe they're going to do a river cruise and some travel before or after, but just looking at different places each trip and piecing together more puzzle pieces from across the globe. Sometimes we get single travelers that are looking to connect with other single travelers. They could be divorcees, they could be widows, just looking for an opportunity to find other people that they can travel with. So how do you build that?
It's nice to hear that there's an opportunity. Just because someone's a widow or widower doesn't mean they have to give up traveling and seeing the world.
That's correct.
Right, and you and I were talking about that a little while ago, and I think it's really important too, because you've gone through a horrible experience, losing your loved one, and now you feel like you want to get out and travel, but how do I even begin?
Right.
What do I do?
Right.
I'm alone.
Right.
It's a little intimidating.
Yeah, and that's the more consultative part. There are companies that specialize in single women travelers, not necessarily senior single women, but single women travelers. There are organizations or different types of opportunities where you can go on a cruise, and it's like if you are a social person, you'll meet people on the cruise, especially the smaller cruise ships. So there's possibilities with that.
Is that because you dine with other people at your table?
And you'll
so
be on the shore excursions with people, and you'll see them again and again. Okay. And everybody who does a trip like that will meet somebody. They'll find people who are either in a similar boat, again pun intended, but they will find people. And of course, there's always, depending on what budget is, a lot of times they'll just build the custom program for travelers. Not so often just for one person, but I can do that. It's like, someone wants to go solo to Australia. I did have a female client in her, I would say 60s, who did a solo trip around Australia, tied it in with a convention at the end of it, so she was going with a purpose, but all of the travel before and after she did on her own. Same thing the following year with another convention in Asia. We did a gentleman who traveled around on his own. He was in his 70s and visited Taiwan and visited Japan, and he did that on his own. So there are those opportunities as well.
That's great. So you just shared a couple other nice stories of, I think, some younger people. You said they were more professionals, but some of your clients that maybe are 60 plus, you talked about. Do you have one or two amazing stories that sticks out that you would love to share?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest ones, and again, everybody's different, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, in terms of people who have different capabilities or more limited. But I had clients it was my bucket. Everyone has their bucket list of where they want to travel. I have a bucket list of where I want to sell travel, and as you mentioned, I've sold travel to over more than 100 countries. I have partners in more than 100 countries. But I had one gaping hole in my selling travel resume, and that was Antarctica. And I had my first clients go to Antarctica early this year, and they were in their late 80s. And they were lovely, and they were very physically active, and they built a post-trip that included hiking and everything. I was like, you guys, power to you, do it while you can. Right. And on the Antarctic cruise at the tail end, like the last full day, they have what's called the polar plunge, where you have the option of jumping into the frigid waters of the Southern Ocean. And one of the two, the woman, 87 years old, decided she was going to do it. She became the fan favorite as everyone was looking at mom or grandma who was going to jump in, and she did it. And I
Good
love
for
that story
her.
of people doing fascinating things, expanding their comfort zone,
Yeah.
whether it's something physically like that or even something as basic as trying a food that you wouldn't normally travel or try during your travels or when you're at home. So there's so many different ways that people can do it. But that's kind of one of my standout favorites of senior travel experience.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that chilling story. Pun intended.
Unintended.
So you talked about a bucket list,
Mhm.
and I have a bucket list too.
Mhm.
And COVID, we lost some years, right?
Right.
We couldn't travel. So now I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting older. I need, especially those very far destinations that require a long, air travel. Get those in now before
Right.
it's too late, because nobody knows what the future is.
Right.
I mean, do people come to you and say, am I too old to go on this trip? Or I've always wanted to go someplace, but, do you think I can handle it?
Yeah, I think what you expressed is the common feeling among seniors that I work with, which is COVID taught a really important lesson, which was you don't know when you're not going to be able to travel again. Now,
Right.
COVID was not personal health induced, it was global health induced.
Correct.
So, but people were sitting in their basements or walking around their neighborhood, watching the airplanes still fly overhead and be like, I want to be on that, and they're just having this sense of withdrawal. So when COVID started to wane, the pace of travel for individuals really picked up, and the travel industry has recovered beyond where it could have been imagined even before COVID. So it has exceeded where it was. So travelers who would travel once a year are now traveling 3 times every 2 years. Or people who would travel 2 times a year are now traveling 5 times every 2 years. So the pace of travel has picked up. I have one client that is traveling internationally every 2 months. They're going someplace different. They do about half of their trips with me, and they are all over the place in terms of where they're going. So exciting because they just realize, right now we physically can, but it may not be a global health thing like COVID that comes up, but it could be a personal health thing where I'm no longer able to have that experience, and then they look back at COVID and say, I don't want that. So people are hitting their bucket list
Right.
at a more rapid
pace. The sense
pace.
of urgency.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful. So we talked about COVID,
Mm-hmm.
how a lot of people gave up travel for years.
Mhm.
So for those people that haven't traveled abroad in years, what are some of the first steps that you would suggest in the planning process?
Yeah, I think for seniors in particular, I think the first thing you do is you really do need to do a realistic assessment of what you can handle. We talked about the 87-year-old jumping in the water and then hiking. She was able to handle it, but a
Right.
lot of people can't. So I think in terms of planning, just figure where you are in your life, and can you handle a 5-mile hike on flat terrain? Okay, if you can do that, great. If you can't, how far can you go? What does that look like? And that's kind of the beginning and the nut of what that looks like. But you also have to ask yourself in terms of your assessments, like, what types of travel do I like? There are some people, and I really don't work with the all-inclusive beach resorts. I don't find I add value to that. I really haven't focused on learning the the products, so I really can't tell you the difference between Moon Palace and Sun Palace and Iberostar and Riu. I haven't learned that marketplace. But for some people, my mother included, who her happy place is Aruba, and she would be happy just going over and over and over again to Aruba. Assess what you're interested in. Are you someone that just wants to get to a warm climate and just relax and maybe see little bits of things? Do you want to be in a place where you're going to be out every day and changing hotels after 2 nights? What does that look like? What are your physical capabilities, and what are you interested in? So that's really the first step, Jordan, I think, in terms of answering your question. What do people what are people looking for in travel? And then you get into the more practical elements. Is your passport current? All right. If you have a passport, when's it running down? Because a lot of countries still require 6-month validity of passport past the expiration date. So you have to be aware of that. And if your passport is expired by more than a year, I don't remember the exact time, you have to start over again. So making sure you got your documentation.
Great point. Smart ideas and travel IDs and passports have been so much in the news. I guess in the last 2 or 3 years. So how long before someone wants to travel are you recommending them do their passport and get their documents in order.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for senior travelers, I talk to clients and who are in their 70s, and they are like, this is my last passport renewal, most likely. They realize they're not doing it again. So the passport's good for 10 years. You have to look at your travel profile. For me, it's like, if I renew my passport too early, I'm going to have an overlap period, but then it's going to expire sooner, and I'm going to have to get a new one sooner. So you kind of look at that. If your travel horizon's only 5 years, get your passport now. If you don't think you're going to physically be able to travel in 10 years, there's no reason to wait in terms of being close. Now, passport services, you can expedite and generally get a passport generally within 3 or 4 weeks. Asterisk, don't hold me to that, because it all depends on the government processing and what the government staffing levels are. But that's really what it's been. Regular service can take 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and when they're backlogged, it can take several months. But in general, they're able to turn them around reasonably quickly. But we don't want to be in a situation where you're like, I want to go travel now, I don't have a passport, let's book something for next month. That's an invitation for bad stuff.
So you're saying 3 or 4 months?
That's a good starting point. But again, if your travel
no more than 6 months, but
and if you need to get a photo, you got to allow time to get your photo, because sometimes
we're trying to minimize the stress
Right.
of booking a trip, the unforeseen circumstances, and just to make it a good process to enjoy.
Right, and again, if you've got someone who says, I'm not going to be traveling for that much longer, 5 years, 10-year passport, if you're telling me you're planning a trip for 9 months from now, start the passport process now, even though you're not going to use it by the time you get it for another 7 months, because you're probably not going to be renewing that after 10 years anyway if you're in your 70s or early 80s. So different answer for people in their 60s and 50s.
Now, talk to us a little bit about the importance of travel insurance.
Yeah, travel insurance, my view is that everyone traveling internationally should have travel insurance. Reason being a couple of things. Number one is virtually every U.S. insurance policy does not cover overseas travel, and Medicare does not cover overseas travel.
Wow.
There are some Medicare supplements that are private that build in that extra piece for overseas travel, but for the most part, figure 99% of the time international travel is not covered. If you get sick overseas, hospitalized overseas, in an accident overseas, that's going to be all out of pocket on you. So that insurance will cover that. Equally and possibly even more important than that are what happens if really bad stuff happens. If you have to be medically evacuated or airlifted out of the country due to an injury. If, God forbid, the worst happens and you die overseas and your body needs to be brought back home. Those are $30,000 to $50,000 expenses, and insurance policies will include that. And because most people don't die overseas and most people don't need emergency air evacuation, the cost of those coverages is rather small. So their factor, age is a factor in insurance premium, duration of trip is a factor in insurance premiums, but those are all factored in. There's also then the other piece of insurance, which is optional, which is the cancellation insurance. Mm-hmm. Do you want to protect the investment of what you're putting into the trip, whether it's $3,000 or $20,000? I have clients, not that many of them, who say, you know what, if I lose the $20,000, I'm not going to be happy, but oh well. Not that many clients like that. Yeah. For most people, that's a big loss. But if you're just going overseas and you're saying, hey, I'm going to go to England and I've got a hotel that I can cancel 3 days before, and I've got tours that can be canceled 24 hours before, and the airline will allow me to reuse the value of my ticket if I cancel, maybe cancellation insurance doesn't need to be added on because you really don't have much penalty that you're facing. But if you've got a $25,000 per person Antarctica or Galapagos cruise, yeah, maybe you do want to protect that investment. So, the really focus when I'm talking with people is let's talk about the core of what's included on the policies and why you really need to buy the insurance. And it's for the evacuation and the repatriation insurance.
And I took it out. My mother was sick,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a trip planned, and I don't know if I'm going to get a call or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of thing, that sort of policy, if you've got the cancellation component,
Right.
It'll protect you beforehand if not just you, but a non-traveling family member gets sick and you need to stay back. It provides protection for that.
Right.
And if you're overseas and you need to return because of a bad thing with a non-traveling family member, you can interrupt the trip and you have coverage for that.
Right.
So, it is a very complex product in terms of understanding what's included and not included, but it's very simple. There's not that many pieces to the coverage. So I spend about 15 minutes, 20 minutes with each client explaining the travel insurance industry, because people don't understand it. And then when I explain it, they pretty much get it. And then it forms the basis for the future.
Different companies, or?
There are a lot of different companies. A lot sell online. There are a lot of big ones. Allianz, Travel Guard, they're all online. I work with a smaller company that's more boutique. I know some of the executive team there. They help me out. And I never have problems with people who file claims who need to be reimbursed, getting reimbursed. So I like having that comfort of someone I know to fight battles if I need to fight the battles.
Right. I didn't know that our medical insurance would not
Right.
cover us when we were overseas. I think that's a really great point that you brought out, because I don't think most people know that.
Right.
And there's different things. You could have a trip on an excursion. Could have political unrest, or uncertainty. So I think, as you and I have talked, there's a bunch of things that could happen, and you don't want to find out the hard way that you're not covered, your trip gets canceled, and you budget enough each year to go on a trip, but you don't want to lose all that money.
Right.
Most people don't want to lose that money.
Right, and in a forum like this, I try not to get too much in the weeds in the insurance, because there are so many nuances. You talk about political unrest. Political unrest would not be covered as a reason for canceling a trip. War is not a coverage for canceling a trip, but terrorism is. So then how do you define terrorism? So we could spend an hour talking about the insurance policies, but for here, let's keep it at a high level and understand that it's something that people need to know.
Hopefully, but something at least to look into.
Right, and most policies are never, there are, majority of times claims aren't filed on a policy, but I've had clients pass away before travel. I've had clients have to cancel due to cancer diagnosis, things like that. You want to make sure that you have you want to make sure that you at least think about the implications of having versus not having that coverage. But regardless, when you set foot out of the country, you want to have that coverage. Age is an important factor, and it's not this audience, but I can tell you, my 23-year-old nephew goes over to Europe just for a week at a time and has a great time, and every time he calls me, Uncle Rick, I need insurance. And because of his age, he's staying at hostels, he doesn't need cancellation coverage, but because of his age, the policy for him to travel for a week and have like $500,000 of medical coverage and emergency evacuation and, God forbid, repatriation of remains, $20. $20 for that trip. So
why would you not do it?
Right. Even so, yes, it's going to be more expensive, obviously, for older folks. But I'm saying even younger folks should have that insurance, because the cost of doing it compared to the cost if you need it is significant.
Right. So I'm sure you have traveled to numerous places. Have you ever had a client that you've planned a whole vacation for that you had not been to, and they came back and were so excited that you decided, okay, now I want to go there?
Yeah, there's so many places. I mean, again, I work with over 100 countries. I've been to almost 60.
Wow.
So that nets out to about 40 that I haven't been to that I want to get to. One of the, let me talk for just a couple of minutes about the trajectory of travel coming out of COVID, because I find it fascinating in terms of where people have gone. So coming out of COVID, the hot destination right out of the box was Portugal. It's close. English is very widely spoken. It's cheap. Nonstop flights, and they never really closed during COVID. So there was this mass of people heading to Portugal, and because they had such a good time, they tell their friends, and then their friends go to Portugal, then their friends go. So we're seeing this add-on. Portugal's still hot. Then I've got 2 clients leaving for Portugal in May, so it's still going on. The following year, 2023, it went a little bit further east. Italy and Greece became popular. And then 2024, it went to Japan. Now, why Japan? Well, people got their feet wet with Europe and are feeling like they can go back and explore more, but also Japan was one of the later opening countries. So people like Japan's now open, and then the demand overwhelmed the industry over there. So it was a great place to visit, but it was hard for me to work that because availability was very difficult. 2025, it seems like it's New Zealand. New Zealand and Australia were the last countries to open. So, so now I'm getting so many requests for New Zealand. So it's interesting, that trajectory. Where do I want to go that clients have gone? I really have been encouraging, because I have a colleague who, and I've sold it, Slovenia. It is like, where is that? What is that? So it's part of the former Yugoslavia. It is a relatively small country that has a little bit of everything: mountains and caves and ocean front and city, and the culture is dynamic, and you can get there actually by flying into Venice, spending a couple days in Venice, and we have a driver pick you up in Venice and drive you across the border, and then you make to the capital, eventually Ljubljana. You fly back, one stop on Lufthansa, Finnair, variety of options coming home. But that scenery is great, and that's on our docket for this coming year, after I have had other clients go and come back with absolutely love stories from Slovenia.
I'm hearing a lot too, that show White Lotus.
Yeah.
So now Thailand, this is the latest one, and so they said, I don't know who they are, but you hear all this talk that Thailand is the hot place now that people are demanding to go to. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see a lot of Southeast Asia, and the thing when you go to certain areas is you don't actually necessarily, when you're going that far, and the countries are relatively small, unlike the United States, you can combine multiple countries. So if you're going to Thailand, you want to go to just a short hop, 1 hour flight to Siem Reap, which is where Angkor Wat is in Cambodia. So we do a lot of Thailand, Cambodia combinations, and do a lot of Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam combinations, because they're all wrapped around each other right there in a short distance. So yeah, looking at that, Southeast Asia has been a good amount of demand for me the past 2 years.
Very interesting. Well,
thank
we
you.
are so excited you were here. I could talk to you all day about travel. Yeah. So thank you.
So I know you,
much.
for the most part, you really are happy where your business is at. So you're not necessarily like a lot of business people. They're looking to grow, and you're like, that's not where I'm at.
Right.
You don't mind maybe like a phone call just for people, if they hear Journey Softly, what are you able to do for listeners, or
so
would you
if
suggest?
folks are interested and want some direction in terms of what to think about, feel free to reach out. You can contact me. I've got a contact form on our website, www.journeysoftly.com. My phone number is also there. I'm happy to give you guidance. It not necessarily will help with the booking of the trip, but can give you ideas in terms of what you need to do, who you can talk to, what products might be good, what destinations might be good. Happy to do
Beautiful. Thank you, Rick, for joining
very
us
welcome.
today.
Yes. And thank you to our listeners and our viewers for joining us on this wonderful topic of travel. And please tune in next week for another episode of
Help, no one told me.